Have you ever wondered how to talk about suicide? It's such a big topic in society, but how do we actually start those conversations or even continue them? In today's episode, we will be talking about this sensitive topic because even if we realize it or not, we're all impacted by suicide one way or another. If it's been your own experience with suicidal thoughts, if it's been one of a loved one, a family member, or even people who are struggling through silent journeys. In today's episode, I'm excited to have Emma here. Emma is a technician on our Stages team. Community Reach Center has an acute treatment unit, which is about providing residential inpatient care for those that are needing some more services with their behavioral health care. So Emma, I'm very excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and brave of you to be able to engage with us in a topic like this one, because when we talk about suicide, there's all these different areas we could talk about, like suicide prevention, treatment for suicide. So we'll get to take our audience through different aspects of suicide. But first, I would love to hear from you. We always like to ask our guests how they reach for their own wellness. So I would love to start with that. What is something you do to reach for your own wellness?
Yeah, there's many ways that I try to reach for my own wellness, whether that be through my work at a mental health facility, boots on the ground, working with people who may be struggling with any sort of ailment, as well as in my personal life, getting out in nature. I do a lot of advocacy for mental health through social media. I've done something called grief journals to process my own grief, but I do make them public so that people can read them and relate, and that's gotten a lot of positive feedback, and it's really helped me in my healing journey.
Wait, I want to hear a little bit more about that. And I know we're talking about suicide, but just because I'm so curious, so you have journaled about grief yourself as a coping skill, and you share that. What kind of things, if someone was scrolling through or are curious to learn more about grief journaling, just tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so it's basically based off of my own lived experience of my grief. And it's extremely raw, really vulnerable. It basically happens when I have an eruption of grief and I need to process it. It could be just a flow of words of what's coming up for me, or the process of what I'm feeling and what grief is like. And it will be paired with a picture, maybe of my loved one, or even me crying, or in a place that reminds me of my grief. And I just talk really authentically about it. And I've gotten so many incredible responses of people saying that it has helped them. And often people don't see that type of vulnerability and rawness when it comes to grief because it's a taboo subject. So.
Wow. Well, and it's also a nice reflection of some things we'll be talking today, because many times getting to share one story or coming out of what can be a silent or dark place can help, and we all benefit when we get to feel and share together in that.
Totally.
Okay, so let's talk about your group that you run at Stages. What's it called? What's it all about?
Yeah, so I run the suicide prevention group. This was implemented. I had a passion for this subject and the advocacy of prevention, and my boss said, why don't you run a group and facilitate it? So for me, I like to kind of change what activity we do, just so it doesn't get stale for me, but often I will show some sort of video of someone telling their stories or something more existential about suicide. And then I leave time for discussion about the topic, how it affects people in there. And I always disclose that it's a sensitive topic, but an important one, because a lot of our clients that come through Stages are there because they have suicidal ideation or they have recently attempted. So it really allows people to kind of bond on this really dark human experience and bring them together to kind of be a support system for each other. Whereas before they might have felt extremely alone, extremely isolated for having these feelings. And it's gotten amazing feedback where clients have said, I like that we talk about these tough subjects. So yeah.
What's it like when you have clients with different stories in that space and you know you're bringing on such a, well, I guess I don't know if heavy is the right word, but for some people a very personal subject. What's it like to be in that room and facilitate that space for them?
It's amazing. I mean, we have people cry, and I think that's an amazing thing to experience. And I say, your pain is welcome here. Your tears are welcome. This is a really hard topic. And I think it allows a space for them to feel heard because so many people suffer in silence. And a lot of people say that, people say that you're not alone, but that doesn't change the fact that I feel alone. But I feel like I've had a client say to me who struggled with depression that he bonded with another guy who was there for depression as well. And he's like, we kind of have this unspoken understanding about each other. And I think that through these types of groups, that bond can be created because often we have friendships with people who might not struggle with this, which really isolates us in those feelings. So having these conversations allows us to build a community around tough conversations.
It is so incredible that you were able to create something like that for people that clearly, for the clients that we serve that clearly really need that space, and just even to just say, yeah, we're gonna talk about it today.
Yeah.
And to create a space that is welcoming for that conversation. That's very powerful.
Yeah.
What led or what inspired you to start this group?
Yeah, I mean, I've had many suicide deaths in my life, my most profound being my brother. He took his life almost 6 years ago, and that one obviously gutted me. But I've also lost many friends to it. And for me, there was a common subject of when these deaths happen, what could I have done? What did I miss? And often it's because people feel really like they're a burden. They feel ashamed for having the feelings they do, and people don't know how to bring the topic up, right? And I don't want people to feel guilt for saying, what could I have done? But maybe it will bring a light bulb in their head of like, maybe we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to check in. If someone's struggling, if someone says something that kind of makes our head turn of like, oh, that's interesting. If we see people changing in the way they're moving, I think it's really important not to sugarcoat that and not be afraid to ask people and sit with them in their pain. And, some people might be uncomfortable doing that. And if that's the case, maybe reach out to someone else who knows them and saying, I'm really worried about them. There's always a way to talk about it. And I'm sure the people struggling with suicidal ideations feel really ashamed that they're feeling the way they are. And I think it's important to allow people to know that it's entirely okay to feel that way. But I think that shame and darkness is breeded in silence. And once we allow that conversation to happen and put it in the forefront, we are helping people heal and stay alive.
Emma, you've said so many interesting things that I want to unpack. You mentioned about how some people hear about or are become notified that they've had a loved one pass, and then they think to themselves, what could I have done differently? You talked about the shame and the guilt, or many times how people just don't feel like they can really express how they're feeling or talk about it, or also that maybe we're just not checking in on people in a way and maybe masking some of that. So let's talk about all the things. So first, there are people listening to this who may have struggled with suicidal ideation, or they have someone they very much care about, and they find out then that someone died by suicide. You mentioned that a question that comes up for them is, what could I have done differently? What did I miss? What is your message to those folks?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to say that that's like an entirely normal thing to think in grief. It's called bargaining. It's like, what could I have done to prevent this? And I don't want anyone to feel shame or guilt within that grieving process. However, I think there's something to be said that, like, you know, sometimes it takes that happening to kind of spark someone's like, oh, this is serious. This happens. And that's where I think advocacy work and talking about it is really important. And, you know, maybe that will inspire them to be a safe space for someone. And if they have those ideations themselves, not everyone deserves to know about your struggle. It's a privilege for people to know that. So finding a safe person that you know will validate and make you feel seen is important. A lot of people don't have the right rhetoric, or might meet you with like some platitudes that don't help at all. And that's something to know too, is to have education for yourself of what helps me, what makes me feel seen. Is it someone who says, oh, don't be sad, you know, it's okay? Or is it someone that says, yeah, it makes sense that you're feeling that way? And even having those discussions, if someone says something that doesn't really work for you, naming that. Yeah. Hey, I know you're trying to be helpful, but that actually isn't helpful for me. This is what you could say instead. So educating other people of like what works for them, and if they are willing to receive it, I think is a really important thing.
You know, it's good that you've brought that up, because in the therapeutic space, in my experience, I've talked to some individuals who, yeah, they have their social supports, their family or friends. They may be trying to talk about some things, but they're not getting what they need. Yeah. And to even have the bravery or courage to say that that wasn't helpful, it can feel very like invisible, like someone feeling invisible, like they're trying to say something and it's just, what they're getting back is not it. And so what you're really saying, or what I'm hearing you say, is we just have to state our need.
Totally. Yeah, and that can be scary too, you know, especially in person. I'm an advocate, like if you need to like write it out, write it in an email, write a text, sleep on it, and then maybe say, yeah, no, this is important for me to say. If you need to say it over text, that's fine. But I think that it's a protective factor for you and for others. And maybe it'll change someone's mind about how they meet someone with, you know, who's going through something. And maybe it'll lessen the, I think, just overwhelming amount of people that say, what could I have done? If we start to allow people to know what works for us, then it relieves a lot of guilt from us too.
No, it will relieve guilt, because then we're really having that effective communication. Yeah. I'm going to flip the conversation to the other end. So you're someone who has been trying to support my friend Emma. I hear, and I'm hearing that maybe I'm not doing enough. And so that can put support systems at a loss of what do I actually say? How am I actually supportive? Because it can be absolutely rattling to hear from a loved one that they're having suicidal thoughts. Yeah. And so how would one then on the other end begin to be a better support?
You know what you said at the beginning? I have a lot of people come to me and say, I don't know what to say to my friend. And I tell them, say that. Say, I don't know what to say right now. Like, we really overcomplicate it when showing up for support is really simple. And not having answers is okay. I think that truly showing up is important, because sometimes people say, let me know if you need anything. A lot of times when people are suffering, they don't have the capacity to tell you what they need or know what they need. So if we are able to say, I don't know what to say right now, this is terrible, this sucks, let me sit with you. Or make a time to say, hey, I have time at 3 p.m. if you want to go on a walk. Taking the responsibility out of the person that's struggling and allowing a time and showing the motivation that you want to help them is extremely important. But yeah, I mean, not trying to change where people are, meeting them where they are, saying, you are struggling right now, and I see that. It's valid, it makes sense. I'm going to sit with you. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want to be distracted? Whatever it is. But not trying to talk them out of it, or saying like, no, don't be sad, stuff like that. It's just not helpful. Yeah. I think people feel so validated when they are just witnessed, wherever they are.
I've also found it helpful for me to ask, is this you? Like, in that asking, like, what do you need part, do you need me to just listen and, like, not try to problem solve or try to say anything? Or do you want to, like, do something about it, or, like, be in problem solving mode? Because, like, sometimes when I've talked to some people, too, they feel like they need to, like, actually do something.
Right.
And like, not, like, almost as if listening isn't enough, or creating that space isn't enough. Like, there needs to be another level up. What I heard you saying is, even just creating that space and asking those questions, saying, I don't know what to say, that can totally be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And little things like basic needs. When I was going through my grief, my friends just made sure my basic needs were taken care of. Making me food, making sure I was drinking water, helping me with the dishes, like anything that felt overwhelming or that was totally out of my mind because I was just in my head full of sorrow and grief. Those little things can help too.
That's so good too, because we don't always think of, someone's really upset or navigating through a lot. Let's think about water. Let's think about food. Let's think about those aspects, but they're so key to just nurturing ourselves, because we can let ourselves go when we're going through a lot with our mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about how someone may be feeling through that pain. We've also talked about how we can be supportive as well. I would love to talk about 988 and immediate crisis support. So if we're thinking about suicide prevention, if we're thinking about how to be supportive as societies and communities, what kind of role could a line like 988 play?
Yeah, I think 988 is great because it is made up of volunteers who are there to truly help you through. I did the training for 988 and it didn't end up doing it, but they're trained to be extremely unconditionally validating. And I think having a non-bias ear is incredibly important. And the thing with 988 is those are volunteers volunteering their time to help you through a crisis. And I think especially the idea of like texting too makes it extremely anonymous. I think maybe people would even be afraid to call, to have their voices heard, maybe their voice is trembling, but text is an extremely accessible way to talk and talk through a hard time, knowing that it's going to be held in confidence. So I think that's an extremely important thing. And it's 24 hours too. So maybe you want to call a loved one, but it's 3 a.m., and you feel like a burden calling them and waking them up. But 988 is a service that is available 24/7 for you to process.
And especially given the fact that, like, I love the example of the 3 a.m. call, because that could be like, wait, there's someone out there willing to listen to me. But especially with 988 also, just the fact that we don't have to wait until we're in like the worst of the worst happens, which sometimes we call when that happens, but even if someone's navigating a tough time, sometimes I hear people say, well, maybe I'm not bad enough or things aren't worse enough, but really it's available for anyone to call if they're having really any immediate behavioral health needs, should it be suicidal or not, suicidal thoughts, to just go and get support from someone.
Totally. Yeah, and we get some crisis calls at Stages too, you know, and when people think of crisis, they think the person is suicidal. That's not at all the case. No one can define what a crisis is to you, right? It could be that you got a flat tire and like it has just thrown your whole day into a whirlwind and you're super dysregulated. That can be a crisis. Like, the person at the other end of the phone should know that. That whatever it is, if it's a crisis to you, it's a crisis to you. And that's a protective factor too. Maybe that event could trigger into something more dangerous, you know? So even just getting that help is amazing advocacy for yourself too.
And also, that self-advocacy is part of building resilience, because you're able to reach for help and ask for help. And that can also just help with suicide prevention as a whole, which we were talking a little before the show started about your suicide prevention training and all the things. And I would love to hear a little bit more about some of those key, like the biggest things that you've heard about, but also just, you know, when we talk about suicide with someone, what would be some good things to leave them with if we want them to continue getting more help or more support as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think within my groups I run, I try to do, I print out a thing of like 100 reasons to keep living, and then affirmations, and I'll have them write down 5 of each that they can look at. And I think the combination of having a really hard conversation and saying like, you deserve to be here, you know, like I hear you and I see you, is just a tiny step to allow them to know, oh wow, like maybe they had relationships where they never felt like they could do that. Yeah. And just giving them that space to finally feel that is huge, I think. And then also accompanying it with some sort of gratitude or affirmations, I think, is a really important thing. I've seen the rapport grow stronger with my clients after I've had these conversations and allowed them to express themselves. And yeah, I mean, giving them resources if they'd like, but also, you know, you could be an accountability friend, you know, checking in on them or telling them they can check in on you. I'm huge on that. If I know a friend's struggling, I'm saying, hey, thought of you. How are you doing? You know, I think that's a really important thing. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. Yeah. Well, and especially because in the context of being in a behavioral health treatment center, we would be having those conversations, creating those spaces. Yeah. And those are some great examples of what's happening in those spaces. And so it just makes me think of, for the person that doesn't have any behavioral health training, doesn't have any suicide prevention training, there is mental health first aid, which can help equip, learn, and that's available to the community for ways to be more equipped. And outside of that, making sure people get comfortable saying, yeah, let's maybe that person isn't doing the referral themselves, but being able to be like, and then maybe it's not time to talk to a professional more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's huge, using your resources. And I've had people reach out to me too, and like it's a touchy subject of saying like, oh, maybe you should go see a therapist, because that could be taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
So even helping that person get the resources, I've done that in the past where they don't even know where to start, and I say, okay, like what kind of therapy do you think you would want? Do you want DBT? Do you want trauma therapy? Sending them some therapists that they can go to is helping them feel supported and taking those next steps.
Yeah. And even as that conversation goes, I'm sure that person feels supported along the way. Like, oh, someone actually took time and it was what they were wanting to, and walking on that journey together.
Totally.
So to start closing, I would love to ask you more about something you said earlier, which you were talking about people being in darkness. You had something about people being in darkness and not sugarcoating some of the things, but I would love to hear more about what can we do as people to have these raw, real conversations as well.
Yeah. Again, not sugarcoating it in mental health assessment. When someone has suicidal ideation or when we risk assess, we ask pretty outright, do you have thoughts of killing yourself? Do you have a method planned? Do you have a time frame? All of these things. And research has shown that asking those questions does not cause more suicide. It makes people feel validated. So asking outright, sitting with someone, again, witnessing them, sitting with them where they are, I think is so important. And again, as a support person, it might be super uncomfortable to ask that, like, in person. So if you need to text them, are you having thoughts of killing yourself right now? Because maybe they don't think anyone knows what they're feeling. And if you kind of spark that with them, they're like, oh, wow, maybe they know. Oh, they care if I stay. I think is extremely important. So I think just validating people's darkness is an incredible way to get them out of darkness.
And I love that too, because if someone tells us they're experiencing suicidal thoughts, that's one thing, but we can also start the conversation ourselves by just checking in and saying, I just want to know, are you having some of these thoughts? And if it's a no, it's a no.
Totally.
And if it's a no, it doesn't suddenly mean, like you said, that we put the thought in their mind and now they're going to have suicidal thoughts. Yeah. It's just because we know that could happen when someone's going through a really rough time, and that would be suicide prevention.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, any last things that we haven't talked about suicide prevention that you would want us to know about?
No, I think that we've really covered some great ground. So.
Well, I already felt so comfortable talking with you about suicide prevention. And so I think just great that our clients at our Community Reach Center have that resource where they're in Stages. And we also have other groups where they could talk about it, but to have a group that's very specific about it, like I said at the beginning, has bravery connected to that. So thanks for all that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Reach for Wellness. If something resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. This content is for you. So DM us at Community Reach Center. We also would love for you to stay connected to this episode and future episodes that we have. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all your favorite platforms. So as you have found this episode, please like, share it, and subscribe to this channel and this show. Talk to you next time.